Increasing number of experts in the AI realm, and I don't use the word expert loosely, I mean really the OGs in this space, are coming out and talking about how potentially problematic AI would be in the future. And one of them, more specifically, I think I read an article about where he talked about that the potential of superintelligence in the future would lack empathy, like potentially, on paper at least, humans have. And so, for that reason, it's still very important to continue our conversations about how the future of AI systems can potentially learn a lot of in knowledge and characteristics that is already embedded within the human brain and the human body that sort of makes us, so to speak, human. And so today we're going to cover another paper that was published this month, August 2025, where they also look at neuroimaging and more specifically in thalamus. And it's a breakthrough findings that they've had, and hopefully you'll find it helpful. So let's get started. At the heart of neuroscience lies a profound question. How do many regions of the brain interact with one another that gives rise to our thoughts, our perceptions, our consciousness, emotions, and so forth? While scientists in this space have made great strides in mapping connections between cortical and subcortical regions of the brain, much of what we know today comes from imaging and recording techniques that reveal the correlation rather than causation. Functional MRI, for example, can show us which region activate together, but it cannot determine the direction of influence or the underlying electrical physiological dynamics that happens. The study that we're sharing today, published in Nature Neuroscience, marks a breakthrough in this particular area by directly probing the causal architecture of the human brain at both cortical as well as the thalamic levels. The thalamus is of particular interest in this study, often is described as a relay station. It sits deeply within the brain and connects to virtually all of the cortical areas of the brain. Yet, its role is far more complex than simple signal relaying. It participates in shaping sensory processing, coordinating timing, and even influencing our consciousness. Until now, however, human thalamo-cortical connections have been poorly characterized at the causal electrical physiological level, largely because they are difficult to access within a living brain. The authors of this particular study approached this challenge by working with 27 different patients undergoing intracranial monitoring of drug-resistant epilepsy. These individuals had electrodes already implanted for clinical purposes within the brain, which gave the research team a unique window into the brain's activity and connectivity at a deeper level. On average, these patients had around 180 implanted electrodes in their brain, resulting in a total of 4,864 recording locations across the study from the different regions. To handle the enormous amount of data collected during the study, these researchers use sophisticated signal processing techniques, including measurements of power across different frequency bands, such as alpha, beta, gamma, etc., and intertrial phase coherence, which captures the consistency of the brain's oscillatory brainwaves responses. These researchers then employed dimensionally reductions method to identify distinct patterns within the data that they were collecting, revealing how simulation in different areas of the brain produce different spectral fingerprints. One of the most striking findings was that the stimulation of different regions of the brain consistently produced specific reproducible spectral signatures. These were not random fluctuations of waves, but organized patterns that varied depending on the location and the type of simulation. This suggests that each spectral feature might correspond to a separate mode of information transmission within the brain, akin to different channels on the communication networking that happens within the human brain. These scientists identified at least 3 distinct features, which they labeled feature 1, feature 2, and feature 3, where feature 1 was associated with high frequency gamma brainwaves activities that was emerging prominently when cortical regions were stimulated. In these cases, the thalamus responded before other cortical targets, suggesting that cortical activity is quickly copied to the thalamus, perhaps as part of a feedback and monitoring mechanism within the brain. Feature 3, however, revealed something entirely new. When the researcher stimulated the thalamus directly, they observed that delayed onset theta oscillation, which is lower brain frequency between 4 to 8 hertz, that appeared in both the same side and opposite side cortices. These bilateral theta responses had unique temporal and spatial characteristics, distinguishing them from any previously reported waveform in human electrical physiological responses and data that we've already had. The discovery of these delayed bilateral theta oscillations has major implication to our understanding of the thalamus of the brain itself. Rather than being a simple relay signal system, the thalamus appears to act as a temporal coordinator, as a timing coordinator, initiating slower, synchronizing rhythms, brainwaves, across large-scale cortical networks within the human brain. This is consistent with animal studies suggesting that thalamo-cortical loops are essential for coordinating activities between brain hemispheres. Importantly, the researchers here were cautious not to overinterpret the precise anatomical origins of these signals, given the variability in the electrical placement of the sensors within the patients. Still, their data clearly showed that the different thalamic subregions within the human brain had distinct connectivity patterns and functional signatures, underscoring the heterogeneity of the thalamus as a structure. The scientific findings of this particular paper also resonates with existing theories about brain rhythms, about brain waves, neural oscillations. Theta oscillations, for example, which are the lower brain waves frequencies, have been implicated in memory formation, spatial navigation, and cognitive control. In this particular study, then, their delayed emergence following thalamic stimulation hints at a role in interhemispheric coordination within the human brain, possibly enabling distributed regions to align their activity during complex tasks. Meanwhile, the early thalamic responses to cortical stimulation observed in, for example, feature 1 that we covered earlier supports theories such as fast cortico-thalamo-cortical loops, where these loops could serve to quickly integrate information across the brain and the brain regions, allowing for rapid updates between sensory input and motor planning, or between perception and attention within human brain. What makes this study particularly fascinating and valuable is that it provides a direct causal evidence for these loops mechanisms and these rhythms and oscillations and waves that are happening within the human brain, rather than relying solely on inference from non-invasive imaging or animal models where we have plenty of data from. It fills a critical gap in our understanding, bridging structural connectivity from anatomical studies with functional connectivities from electrical, physiological brain signals. The data sets that were generated by this study is more than a scientific curiosity, to be honest. It has a potential to transform computational modeling of brain neural networks. For the first time ever, modelers can incorporate real human data about directionality, latency, and brainwaves frequency specific connectivity into large-scale simulation, bringing them closer to biological realism from just being potentially digital and computer and AI systems. In addition, this study also has great clinical implication. By mapping these causal pathways, neurosurgeons and neurologists, for example, may eventually tailor interventions such as deep brain stimulation to target specific frequency bands such as alpha, beta, gamma, and neural networks for conditions ranging from epilepsy to depression and so forth. And the findings also challenges the idea of the brain as a single uniform information processor. Instead, it suggests a multiplex system in which different brainwaves frequencies act like separate communication lines carrying different types of information simultaneously. Like you would have different cars in a freeway, having them drive in a specific lane within the freeway, and that is how these pathways appear to be working. Looking forward, there are many possible extensions to this particular scientific work. For example, future studies could potentially examine how these connectivity patterns change during sleep, under anesthesia, or in various disease states. They could also explore whether stimulation parameters can be tuned to selectively engage specific spectral features. In clinical terms, such targeted engagement could lead to more precise neuromodulation therapies, for example, minimizing the side effects while maximizing the therapeutical benefits. For example, if certain thalamo-cortical loops are disrupted in a disorder, a stimulation pattern that restores that natural oscillatory or brainwaves like profile might help the patients, for example. There's also a rich theoretical dimension to the findings of this scientific paper. For example, if the brain indeed uses different frequency channels to route information, then understanding the grammar of this multiplex communication system could be as important as understanding the structure of the brain itself. The discovery of the delayed bilateral theta waves oscillation is extremely intriguing also in this regard, because it raises the question of whether the waveforms of electrical activities within the brain is unique to certain cognitive contexts, or whether it is a general organizing principle of the human brain functions itself. In reflecting on this scientific work, the authors of this study had produced not only a set of striking results, but also a resource, a causal frequency resolved atlas of the human brain itself that will serve the field of neuroscience for years to come. It is a landmark of achievement in human system neuroscience. In addition, another thing that stuck to me the most is that the combination of technological precision, clinical opportunity, and conceptual clarity that it represents within this paper. The ability to, for example, record from nearly 5,000 brain sites is extraordinary and very unique, to be honest. And the patterns revealed by such analysis opens entirely new lines of inquiry in the field of neuroscience. What this study gives us is not just data, but a richer way of thinking about the brain function. It encourages us to see the brain as a dynamic conversation among different brain regions, carried out over multiple channels, multiple frequency channels, and coordinated by deep structures like the thalamus within the human brain. If integrated into computational models, surgical planning, and neural modulation protocols, this kind of causal mapping could reshape how we treat, for example, neurological disorders. It could also help us answer one of the most enduring questions in neuroscience: how does the brain's architecture give rise to the mind's complexity? Connecting these breakthrough scientific studies that happens from time to time within the neuroscience to the work that we've been working on in terms of symbiotic intelligence, it is also clear that the more we learn from the brain, the more we can integrate these nuances within the future AI systems as well as the humanoid systems that we're building. And this type of studies can also serve as additional data streams, for example, to the AI systems as well as humanoids that we've talked about. And the causal connectivity atlas reinforces the vision by showing that the brain's communication is not generic electrical chatter, but it is structured, it is intentional, it is frequency specific signaling that reflects meaningful cognitive as well as physiological states. For instance, the delayed onset theta oscillation and the rapid gamma mediated cortico-thalamic loops identified in the scientific study could be used as templates for detecting a person's internal state from these wearable devices and sensors that capture surface level neural and physiological correlates. These patterns could then inform the future AI systems about whether a human is in a reflective, exploratory, or state of heightened attention or readiness mode. And in practice, a humanoid built on these type of systems and frameworks could learn to adapt in real time to these human states. If the system, for example, detects physiological markers consistent with theta-rich state, it might slow its interaction pace, offering a space for contemplation or creative problem solving. Or on the other hand, if gamma related signals, which is higher frequency, is dominant. It could increase responsiveness, matching the user's heightened focus. In other words, having a more harmoniously interactions and communications and connections between humanoids and humans, and or future of AI systems as in AGI, ASI, and the thalamus' newly illuminated role, as this paper suggests, as a bilateral cortical coordinator further suggests possibilities for designing artificial neural network and AI systems in the future that are not just reactive to humans but are synchronized partners with humans. Such systems could model and predict the timing of the human brain rhythms and brainwaves, aligning their own processing cycles with the user's cognitive tempo to enhance a cooperation and flow between these future AI systems, future humanoid systems, and humans. By rooting this approach in a neuroscientific findings like these, we move closer to engineering future AI human partnerships that share not only information but timing, rhythm, mutual adaptation, not to mention the empathy and sympathy and all the human characteristics that we've been yearning to have within the AI systems. The causal atlas of cortical and thalamic connection is, in this sense, more than a scientific achievement. It is a potential blueprint for the next generations of wearable, augmented, biologically aware humanoids, as well as potentially future AI, as in AGI and ASI systems. I'll go ahead and add the link to this paper if you want to read it for yourself, because obviously I wasn't able to cover everything here because it's a long paper. And yeah, feel free to let me know what you think, what your thoughts are, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.